Farmers and Ranchers Discussion Meet. I am Heather Baker of the AFBF Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee from the state of Massachusetts. I will be serving as room chair for this round. At this time, please turn off your cell phones. Also, please keep distractions as minimal as possible to allow for full concentration by the competitors. In the event of continual distractions, it may be necessary to ask you to leave. Serving as moderator for this round is Heather Graham of the AFBF YF&R Committee from Kentucky. Serving as timekeeper for this round is Clarissa Cawthorn of the AFBF YF&R Committee from Missouri. This year, 37 competitors began the Discussion Meet competitive event. The top 16 competitors advanced by using their cumulative rankings from round 1 and 2. The winner of each discussion of the Sweet 16 round has advanced to this final round. The judges, timekeeper, and competitors have been briefed as to the rules of the competition. I yield control of this competition to your moderator, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. We appreciate all of you taking the time to attend the competition this morning. Competitors, remember you are not allowed to bring up any prepared notes and/or electronic devices, such as smartwatches and cell phones. Competitors, please come forward and take your position at the discussion table. Now that all competitors have been seated, writing is allowed. As our room chair has mentioned, the competitors have been briefed about the competition and their general discussion should be directed toward each other. In my role as moderator, I will not attempt to control or direct this discussion. Remember, the discussion is meant to resemble a committee meeting with the end goal of determining possible solutions to the question at hand. This models the grassroots policy development process, and some statements may not reflect approved AFBF policy. This is not a panel discussion with an active moderator. As such, I will not intervene unless I need to do so or until disparaging or inappropriate remarks are made. Therefore, competitors should moderate and conduct themselves in a cooperative and congenial manner. The question for this round is, agriculture uses water for everything from growing crops, raising livestock, and moving products to and from farms and ranches. Water issues are often hotly debated, are unique to each region, and can pose significant challenges to growers. How can Farm Bureau help address water management challenges and seek long-term solutions for farmers and ranchers? The competitors for this round are Kylie Wheeler, Cole Likely, Matthew McClanahan, and Laura Holmgren. We will begin this discussion with 30-second opening statements from each competitor. Following the opening statements, there will be 30 minutes of open discussion, followed by 1 minute of quiet time for the competitors to prepare their 1-minute closing remarks. Official time is kept by the timekeeper, and I will call time at the conclusion of each period when competitors are required to stop. Competitors, in voluntary order, make your 30-second opening statements. Please stand and direct your opening statements to the audience. The timekeeper will indicate when your 30 seconds have elapsed by holding up a red card. You may begin.
In my state, we're facing water rights issues for the first time. And due to this, to combat, we are creating a water task force. We've been very lucky to model our water task force off of Arizona's. The issue we're facing is a water pipeline that wants to pump water from one county to another. I'm excited to hear about the water quantity issues and quality issues in your states and to see how we as American Farm Bureau can collaborate and learn from each other on these issues.
Water is and will continue to be one of the greatest challenges facing U.S. agriculture. While water issues vary depending on geography and use, we all need to be engaged on this important topic in order to find long-term solutions. Our ability to face non-ag water users hinges on our industry finding common ground and collaborating. With Farm Bureau's network and resources, I'm confident this can happen. I really look forward to this discussion today because water is the lifeblood of agriculture.
I feel this issue on a deeply personal level. As we sit here today, just 1 hour north of us is my 6th-generation family farm. As we continually go to war for the water that our ancestors developed, we seek for one simple solution, and that's to remind consumers and policymakers alike that water invested into agriculture generates our most precious commodity, that is food. Policies such as Policy Watch and Legislative Watch programs through the Utah Farm Bureau and American Farm Bureau help me keep a pulse on agriculture.
The Lakota word for water literally translates to your life. That's a meaning and a definition that hits home with America's farmers and ranchers. 80% of the water that's consumed in our nation is put for agricultural purposes. And for many of our western states, it's actually 90%. However, with life, there comes challenges. Sometimes the water's not in the right place, in the right quantity, in the right quality at the right time. I look forward to discussing with this panel how we will overcome these challenges through Farm Bureau.
You have heard the opening statements. Competitors, please direct your open discussion to your fellow members now.
As we get started, I think it's important for us to clearly define these water management challenges. There are so many different components to water management, and we are a diverse group here. And when we think about water, what water challenges are west of the Mississippi is a lot different from what water challenges are east of the Mississippi. We can think about transportation, allocation, and many other ways to think about this. What are your definitions of water management challenges from all of your respective portions of this country?
Yeah, Matt, I agree. And in Indiana, we're really seeing water quantity issues for the first time. And so I understand where you're coming from in the fact that, west of the Mississippi versus east. But in reality, I think we're all going to face water quantity issues at some point. In parts of Indiana, we have too much. But in other parts, we're struggling to not have enough due to a factory that's going in. So that's why that water pipeline is being inputted in our counties. So I would love to hear your take, Laura, on water transportation or even coal. Some of the things you're seeing in your states and how we can implement that in ours to better understand and make policy that's proactive rather than reactive.
Absolutely. Kylie, thank you so much for pointing to me. Being here in the Great Salt Lake and having this discussion is it's an honor, and it's also so pertinent to me because I farm off of one of the tributaries that feeds the Great Salt Lake, and it hit its lowest level in 2022. But I also can recognize, as a teenager, I went to North Carolina to work on a farm. I spent the first couple of days wandering this beautiful farm looking for their irrigation system, which just wasn't there. So I understand that these are broad spectrum issues, but lucky for us, we do have a foundation in Farm Bureau to talk about some of the existing resources in and especially in my state, who has seen water quality battles for a significant amount of time, to maybe give you guys a peek into the future. Cole, I know that you're in Idaho and you might be seeing some of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks, Laura, and thanks, Matt, for bringing this discussion to a head, because I think it is really important to understand what the issues are, and so we can have a really focused conversation, because the AFBF policy book has over 30 pages of policy related to just water. There's over 400 instances where water is used in the policy book, and just for some context, agriculture is only used about 200 times. So I think it's really important that we bring this scope into perspective so that we have some really good conversation. Within Idaho, I think the three issues that we're seeing right now, number one is intra-ag issues. I said it in my opening statement, but in Idaho, before we can reach out to the non-ag water users, we've got to come to the table and find common ground, because there's a lot of concern and livelihoods are at stake, frankly, between groundwater users and surface water users right now. So that's kind of number one on my mind. Number two is the water quality issues, and I think Idaho made the news for the first time ever, maybe the second time, in the latest EPA ruling, or the Waters in the United States ruling. So Waters in the United States is very important to us, water quantity issues, and then water infrastructure issues are very important. Matt, what are you seeing in Tennessee as some of your issues as well?
So certainly, many of these that you all have already mentioned, we have competition with all the people that are moving to Tennessee, so we're seeing increased competition from residential uses. And one that we haven't discussed discussed so far is transportation. In Tennessee, we have, of course, the Mississippi River on our western boundary and the Cumberland and Tennessee rivers that bisect the state. The Mississippi River hit historical lows in the past few years, and that had a direct impact on my friends and family's farms in West Tennessee because it lowered their ability to market their goods. In fact, 550 million pounds of commodities travel down the Mississippi River, which is worth $130 billion. If we don't have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dredging the Mississippi River and Tennessee rivers and make sure that we're making an investment in infrastructure, then it's going to be detrimental for our farmers as well. Speaking of federal programs, I think we've done a good job of identifying the issues that we face. As we look to possible solutions, what do you think is the federal government's role potentially in helping address some of these water concerns? We'll start with you, Laura.
Just from experience, it's an effective process, but it is sometimes a slow process getting things to a federal level. And in terms of Farm Bureau playing a role in this solution, I really want to tip my hat to this grassroots model, because when we have issues on our farm and when that Great Salt Lake hit a great low, I felt that the head of every Salt Lake City resident pivot towards us, and they were looking at agriculture. It meant a lot that we could go to our county Farm Bureau, and one way that our state really supported us was having members of the state water engineer at our convention to check up on our water rights. So that's a state employee, and all of those action items are working their way towards federal programs. What are you seeing in Indiana, Kylie?
Yeah, so one thing we've done as a Farm Bureau is we've created that water task force. That's been huge for us to try and get on the front end of this and be that proactive versus reactive. So I appreciate that you brought up what Farm Bureau is doing. And really one thing I think that we can look at as American Farm Bureau is currently our natural resources fall kind of under one department, but we have issue advisory committees. I would personally love to see Farm Bureau create a water-specific committee that would allow us to, those of us states that are maybe creating water task force or seeing water issues, to then allow us to connect with one another. So they would have that kind of database to say, in my state, we're seeing water quantity for the first time. Hey, reach out to Utah, reach out to Arizona. They already have these task forces or these committees, whatever your Farm Bureau is doing, and be able to connect us. We're very lucky. We were able to connect with Arizona kind of on our own and get connected with some of the other western states seeing similar issues. But I think if it hadn't been for Farm Bureau, we would have kind of been up a creek a little bit. We wouldn't have known where to begin. So that's one thing I think we can do as American Farm Bureau. What are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of a water-specific task force?
Yeah, thanks, Kylie. And I think that that's important to get to, how can we implement a task force, or maybe the opportunity to create a task force. But I'm still a little bit unsure of all the issues. I think we're not quite ready for the solutions yet. We talked a lot about water quality issues, and I think the difference in water quality issues between Idaho and what you guys are seeing in the Mississippi drainage is probably quite a bit different. The hypoxia issue in the Gulf of Mexico and what we're seeing with nutrient loss coming off of our farms into the Mississippi River Delta is quite concerning. And Farm Bureau has been kind of, right there with farmers the entire time. They helped create the Ag Nutrient Policy Council, which has really, been the leader on this issue. They've gotten farmers to the table. They've gotten farmers to start changing practices. So I think, this nutrient loss in the Mississippi River drainage is really important. What other water quality issues are you guys seeing, Matt, in that area?
Certainly. So we're very concerned with any kind of runoff issues. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to how we can utilize Farm Bureau in addressing some of these water quality concerns, I think a lot of it comes down to educating people on proper conservation practices. While we've seen an exponential growth in no-till in the past 30 years, we are still having a growing edge when it comes to adopting no-till practices, making sure that we're utilizing some of these nutrient management practices. Tennessee Department of Agriculture has actually been in talks with rewarding farmers on a per-acre basis whenever they actually put out a nutrient program on their farm, to speak with a technical specialist about how they're managing their waste, how they're managing their fertilizers and pesticides, and then in turn to be rewarded from that with some financial incentives as well. I think that if Farm Bureau can help promote that on a nationwide basis, state by state, I think that would be valuable across the country. I believe Utah does something similar to that, Laura.
Yeah, we do, and I think that this actually pairs well with the solution of a task force because I'm learning things. I think that's what a task force is for. Not exclusively solutions, but to understand each other's problems as well. So I think that that's a great pairing into potentially our first solution here. As we learn, it is the most crucial thing that we could do to have somebody, a coach, teach us about these issues and to understand the research and data that comes when we prepare to solve these problems. That research is ever changing. These sort of committees and task force can help us understand the data. One thing that I saw in Utah is a misinterpretation of some of the research. It started circulating that Utah's farms and ranches use 80% of Utah's water, when the statistic is actually, of the 7% of water diverted for agriculture, we only use 80%. Those two statistics read very differently. So I think understanding these and going forwards with solutions, that task force is going to need to have an education component to it.
Absolutely. And one thing too, with back to kind of the water quality, you know, our neighbors have the H2 Ohio program, so kind of similar to, I believe, Tennessee's program, where they're incentivizing farmers to install best management practices on their farms. That's one thing we in Indiana are trying to look at a state level. We currently are offering a free soil sampling program that's specifically looking at the Gulf hypoxia program, like you were talking about, Cole. And so we're able to provide free soil sampling to farmers that have not traditionally sampled. Our goal is those that haven't sampled in the last 4 years, to try and get more new farmers aware of what their nitrogen or what their phosphorus levels are and how to combat runoff, so that way we can make an impact. Even though it's not really impacting us in Indiana at the moment, it's in fact impacting us those downstream. And we want to care about our neighbors downstream too. So is that something you guys think that your states could look at implementing? And that's run through our State Department of Agriculture.
First of all, I appreciate the pun downstream in this discussion this morning. But yes, certainly. I mean, I think building partnerships with people that you may not necessarily intrinsically think about is important too. For example, in Tennessee, we have a grant program with the Tennessee Valley Authority, which of course was known for electric production and flood control. But they now have a program where they will actually plant trees along riparian buffer zones along rivers in the Tennessee Valley watershed, which again helps address that water quality concern. And we've been partnering with our local Farm Bureau boards to help identify those individual landowners along that area so that we can reach out to them with this grant opportunity. Cole, what are some of the things that you all are doing at the local county level through your Farm Bureau board to address some of these water quantity and quality concerns?
Yeah, well, and thanks for asking, because this water issue, like I said, it varies so much by use and geography, even within counties. Idaho is such a diverse state in their agricultural goods. In northern Idaho, we have dryland wheat farmers. In southern Idaho, we have both surface water users growing corn and alfalfa for our dairies, as well as potatoes in eastern Idaho. So our issues are very county specific. And right now, I don't think we as a county farm bureau are doing enough to address these issues and talking with other counties in addressing these issues. I think that Farm Bureau in general, right? We have the structure to make these things happen. We have the structure to make these conversations happen, and whether they're happening or not, they need to. And water is such a hot, pressing topic right now, and if we don't address it right this minute, I mean this year, we're going to be in a load of trouble into the future. I think, just back to the task force, because I really like what you guys are talking about, the task force. And Kylie, I'm asking you specifically because I want to see if we can replicate something like that in Idaho. Idaho does a great job. Our governor and lieutenant governor are really involved in the process, and we've created this comprehensive plan with input from Farm Bureau. But task forces in Idaho in the past haven't really been that productive. You know, it's a task force for a task force's perspective. And like I said, in Idaho, we have such diverse water users that we build the task force, and then, you know, maybe we just sit at the table and squabble for a long time.
Yeah, so one thing we have done is looking at that region that's really impacted right now with the quantity issue. You know, quality has been an issue in Indiana before in terms of, you know, the things we've talked about today. But the quantity is really new for us. And to be honest, that's the primary focus of that water task force right now. I think we will grow to also more focus on the quality eventually, but that our LEAP project is what it's called, that's the pipeline that's going in. So this water task force is primarily connecting with the farm bureaus in the 2 counties where that water is going to be transported from and to, Because even where it's going to be transported to, they are worried about then the water discharge, where that discarded water is going to go and the storage for that, because clearly they've not had that amount of water before. So that's kind of been our thoughts on the task force, and we've really worked at that local level, kind of, even though we made it a state committee, we've really connected with those local levels to hear their input and hear from those farmers. Why are you concerned about this pipeline going through? Why are you concerned? And the reality is the concern is maybe 100 million gallons of water a day is fine for 20 years, but what happens 25 years from now?
Yeah.
So that's something we're looking at. And Laura, I wonder if you're seeing the same thing here in Utah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I love this term task force. It sounds a little more 007, which I'm into. In Utah, we have something called PIRC, Policy Issue Research Committees, and I think that we see those a lot. And you know, to your point, Cole, how do we get action items out of them? And I think that mother necessity provides, and especially with quantity issues, those research committees have a drive and a necessary collaboration. If we took these programs from a state level to a national level, I think that solutions would come. So you're saying, how do we get action items? And my solution to that is collaboration. A great example of that is in the Midwest and East, there's tile drainage is covered through federal programs, and it's just not in Utah. And you wouldn't think you need tile drainage in the desert, but 1 hour north of here is almost Idaho, and we could sure use some tile drainage. We talk a lot about water conservation, but not necessarily refueling. Those ideas come from other committees. So maybe a solution for our task force is to make it regional, not even national or local, but regional.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think, and even having those regions broken down, and then at the state level, and then even at the county level in those individual water districts, I think that's a wonderful way to handle that. And the wonderful thing about Farm Bureau is that it provides that table for this task force that we've discussed to be able to come together to work together. And whether it's individuals that have an interest from the private sector or farmers and ranchers or government or municipalities, we have a place for everyone to be able to come together to work together for voluntarily making these decisions when it comes to conserving water. As we kind of discuss this, one thing that I do want to make mention of as we identify these problems and as we start working towards some solutions, the Colorado River, of course, is an issue that is very much in our minds. And just last year in 2023, the federal government was breathing down the necks of the states of Arizona, Nevada, and California, making some waves that they were perhaps going to implement some federal regulations on those states if they didn't voluntarily decide that they would reduce their water structure. California took the biggest hit. They reduced their water from now through 2026 by 1.6 million acres of water, and Nevada and Arizona did as well. And in return, the federal government then paid those California farmers who grow 90% of our winter vegetables a lot of compensation for that as well. Does that Colorado precedent, does it set another example that we can utilize as we begin to work regionally with states to come to a voluntarily led solution? Kylie, go ahead.
Yeah, to be honest, Matt, I do have concerns that, we're seeing that land fallowing that's happening in California right now. Farmers are being paid not to farm that land. And like you said, they're one of our primary producers for winter vegetables. So I have a concern that potentially in Indiana in the future, if we have water quantity issues, are they going to start paying us to not farm? But in reality, we don't have the acreage like a state like California. We don't have that capacity to not grow. So that's a concern for me. Cole, are you seeing similar things in Idaho, or is that a concern for you?
So at this moment, it's not too much of a concern because, like I alluded to earlier, Idaho is a sovereign state when it comes to water. We have a first in right, first in time policy, which means that the water right users that have the oldest right have access to the water first, and it goes down from there. So, like I mentioned earlier as well, we still have concerns. There's junior water rights users that their livelihoods are at stake because their wells could be shut off. So we're very concerned about that. But I think on the federal level, where I see the most concern and where Farm Bureau has done some amazing things is with our dams. One of our Congress members from Idaho proposed taking out 3 of the lower Snake River dams in the Snake River drainage. And within our Idaho policy book and within American Farm Bureau policy book, we have a lot of wording around water infrastructure and dams specifically. And so I was just completely amazed to see the unified voice of Farm Bureau and the mobilization that happened from a county level all the way up to a state to a national level, and the response that we got from our congressman, from the USDA, from Army Corps of Engineers was absolutely incredible. I think that's where it comes to Farm Bureau does amazing at, again, being that voice for agriculture and mobilizing from the grassroots level.
Yeah,
Laura.
so I just wanted to add to the Colorado conversation, and Cole, your conversation as well, because Utah has similar laws to you, first and right, first in time. Our first water right on our farm is from 1880. We pride ourselves on that and the conservation of it, using it well. But in Utah, we do have the Colorado River, and that is considered, federal issues. So when we talk about solving issues like that, and when we consider fouling, I think there's two ways to address that. First, we need to make sure that on a local and state level, we have representation, because that Colorado River doesn't affect me in northern Utah, but my friends and community members in southern Utah really are. So we need to make sure that they're in the room and that we understand that issue, so that as Farm Bureau members we can vote together, because those federal issues, they are coming to us and coming for us.
And kind of building on that point about hating to see agricultural land stand fallow, I want to commend Utah for their program, that through their agricultural voluntarily incentive program, Ag VIP, they actually paid some producers, the Brandon family. They had moved from Tennessee to Utah, and they had alfalfa hay. Of course, that's a very water-rich crop to grow, and through that program, they were able to get some cost share assistance to build some new water handling technology, some advanced irrigation, and they transitioned in their late season alfalfa from alfalfa to Christmas trees, which requires a lot less water. And that was effective for that family, and they were able to still utilize that land in an effective way as well.
I think,
go ahead.
I think that's an interesting point too, to look at crops. We've talked about diversity in some of our previous points, and maybe that's something we need to consider here too in terms of water quantity availability, is looking at our crops and making sure that we're also supporting as an organization plant breeding and plant genetics that need less water. There's already drought resistant different genetics out there on the market, but continuing that support to our partners and to our sponsors even here today that are doing some of that research.
And
What are your guys' thoughts?
Sharing that story with the public as well. I just wanted to put that out there, because it's not just about using the plants, but letting them know that our corn is the most drought-resistant, efficient corn that we can possibly have. Pardon me, Cole.
No, you're just fine. And I think that's a great point, Kylie. And our farmers are doing a lot of that right now. And so I think the grassroots farmer-led water conservation projects are really important and are really making a difference. And something I want to run by you guys, something we have in Idaho is the Idaho Water Supply Bank. So if a farmer doesn't need his full allocation of water for the year, he can put up some of that water. If it could be the full amount, or it can be a smaller amount. And essentially he could put it up to this water supply bank, and from there that water can be allocated to a different user. It has to meet beneficial use, which is good for agriculture. But again, if we as an industry can get behind this common idea that other farmers are in need, instead of me taking as much water as I can, especially if I have a crop like barley this year instead of corn, maybe we can see some actual impact. I also wanted to come back to Matt's point on funding, and there is some incredible projects out there and incredible funding coming from a federal level, coming from a state level, coming from county levels, coming from city levels. One concern that I have is the funding for these. How do we make sure that this, and maybe it's not make sure, how do we address the funding issue? Because money is not, completely available everywhere we go. And if we just rely on the federal government to continue pushing money onto our farms, to me, that's not sustainable. Laura?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, a great place to stand, because what we want and what people want is conservation, is proper management. I think that a way to ensure funding is to maybe have some sort of participation in conservation programs, ways to prove up just how well that we are doing. So every farmer or rancher that becomes eligible for these fundings is also doing X, Y, Z to contribute to the environment, to contribute to natural resources. It feels as though farmers are almost punished for being sustainable, and we need to change the culture on that. Go ahead, Matthew. I can tell you've got something to say.
No, I think you all are making excellent points for sure. No, and when it comes to how do we ensure funding sources long terms, to your point about making sure that we're rewarding farmers for doing what they've been doing. We can utilize that through the private sector with, for example, Kellogg's cereal in Illinois. They actually have a program where if farmers implement conservation practices like no-till, like cover crops that address these water concerns that we've been discussing, you know, a healthy soil is a soil that collects more water and less runoff. They actually provide those farmers with a premium for their bushels that they produce on their farms. And we can also utilize use taxes as well. For example, in Tennessee, the more people that move in, more people that buy and sell property, more homes that are sold, part of those funds go to our Department of Agriculture that are then reinvested in our farmers and producers so that they can implement these conservation programs. And we've talked a lot about some good solutions, and we've mentioned some technology as well, but I really want to dive into irrigation technology specifically, because we've seen so many advancements with that. Kylie, of course, with your background in Indiana, have you seen farmers utilize new technology when it comes to being able to measure moisture meters on their respective row crop farms?
So to be honest, in Indiana, we don't have that much irrigated land. However, I did work in Minnesota for a time, and all of that land was under irrigation. So yeah, there is some testing that was done to ensure water moisture that was holding. One thing at the state level we're doing is kind of coming back to that cost share type program or funding program, is to offer funding for practices put on the ground like cover crops to protect that moisture. What we're seeing though in areas, again, still is that water holding and that water pooling, and that's another issue, and that's why tile drainage in our area where I'm at specifically is so important. So in terms of tracking that moisture, we're almost having to remove it sometimes. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well, that just because it's an issue maybe for you guys, in Utah that's maybe not as much of an issue, but that water drainage is still huge for us. So in terms of collecting that moisture level, I don't know that we have great data on that yet, and that's something that I had written down in my notes, is we've got to get more data driven, especially at our state that is so ag focused.
And yeah, so Matt, maybe there's two pieces here. We want to talk about technology, but I also want to talk about finances. So I'm going to try to do both here very quickly. The financial piece, I love what you bring up in the conservation. For every 1% increase in soil organic matter, our soils are able to hold 20,000 more gallons per acre of water just holding in the soil. To us in the West, I know that's in Indiana and the East where you guys have too much, maybe that doesn't mean as much. But for us, that starts. I'm starting to put dollar signs behind that. That's less dollars I need to put on my crop. It's less fertilizer I need to put on my crop. All in, Farm Bureau should be pushing these types of conservation practices for the benefit of the farms. If it's no other reason, then you can increase your bottom line by doing some of these practices. And right now, the public narrative is not nearly around that. So I think that's one area that we as Farm Bureau can improve. On the technology piece, in Idaho, we're seeing a lot of really interesting technology and maybe simpler than what we see kind of in the news, but we're seeing a lot of implementation of soil moisture probes and just simply water meters. For the longest time, we were not able to, tell how much water we were pushing out, especially on dairies that are putting, brown water out on their fields or whatever that is. We weren't able to tell how much that is. So just getting a baseline data amount of what water we're using can go a long ways. And then I think the last technology that we're seeing, and maybe not so much technology, but a shift in paradigm, is efficiency of water delivery. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. The users who are getting that water delivered are benefiting quite a bit because they're getting their full allocation of water. However, there's some unintended consequences that we're not seeing. The water that's delivered into Idaho to some of these surface water users, as it's being delivered, there's a lot of recharge happening there. And while it's good for those users who are getting that water, it may not be good for the groundwater users who are relying on that recharge effort. Laura, you were really excited to talk about that technology. I'm interested in your irrigation thoughts.
No, this is our world, and we do see a lot of funding. The Utah Department of Food and Ag gave out hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve technologies in irrigation systems. So I've heard once that trends and technologies start on the coasts and work their way towards the center of our nation. And I sometimes feel that way because these programs that are now funded and these technologies that we're seeing, from storing our crops to irrigating our crops, they are happening other places. So showing up where we're showing up, and also pressing the issue on why isn't tile drainage covered yet, gets us across the board to the next. Is that where you wanted to go with technology?
No, definitely. No, I think that's a wonderful discussion that we've had, and being able to utilize Farm Bureau to influence our policymakers to make sure that that funding is covered and influence the farmers that make up our boards. As our time draws to a close, I think it's important for us to gather our thoughts for an action plan and be able to move forward. So I've written down that we're wanting to be working together with all stakeholders, whether it's private business or individual farmers and producers, make sure that we're educating farmers about conservation practices and new activities that can help reduce water usage, and finally utilizing that technology piece that we've discussed here today, whether it's irrigation works or other components as well.
And
Cole, do you
I
have
think
any?
another aspect could be that we, again, kind of come back to that water task force and how we as American Farm Bureau can partner each other and make sure that we're able as a whole organization to see Tennessee's needs, Utah's needs, and say, you're currently having the same issue. I'm going to match you guys together so we can learn from one another. I think that comes back to that education aspect that you were hitting on as well, Matt.
I think you guys blew the cover off. I was just going to add collaboration as well, and there's a lot of existing programs where we can accomplish that here in the American Farm Bureau.
Yeah.
And I think you guys are spot on too, and maybe if I could just add one more thing, I think shifting our perspective from defense to offense is really important. Farm Bureau does such a good job at mobilizing and being a unified voice for farmers that we need to continue doing that. It probably doesn't need to be said because this is a group of farmers. Farm Bureau is a group of farmers that loves what they're doing so much that they're willing to engage and volunteer. But you know, it's so important. I mentioned it earlier, but just to go back to the Waters of the United States ruling, you know, that's not necessarily a local-led mobilization, but it's something that Farm Bureau on a national level did really well.
Time has been called. Please prepare your closing statements. I ask that the audience remain quiet for 1 minute to aid the competitors in their preparation. Time. Please put down your pencils, and in voluntary order, please stand and share your 1 minute closing statements.
When my great-great-grandpa Albert stepped off his buckboard in 1908, I don't think he could have thought that these issues, these water issues, would be as complex and as complicated as they are. Heck, our Farm Bureau policy book has over 30 pages of water-specific topics. You know, we covered a lot of really great issues, obviously not 30-page worth of it, but I also want to focus on our solutions. We talked about task force, we talked about education, and we talked about mobilization. And my challenge for everybody up here on the stage, everybody in the audience, and everybody listening is to be engaged. Learn about your local issues and be engaged. My great-great-grandpa knew that the water is the lifeblood of agriculture, and me and all of us in here need to protect it.
Water issues are not new, and they won't be fixed overnight. I'm so excited that we were able to have this conversation today and look at technology and look at potentially a task force and how we are going to be able to collaborate as Farm Bureau. This organization is a big tent. We have many partners, we have many parts, we have many pieces, and we want to help protect all of our diverse partners and all of our diverse producers with our water management practices to be able to learn from one another and to make sure we educate the future generation on the importance of water.
Today, as we discuss advancing technologies to improve our water consumption, as we talked about understanding water law that affects us across the board, and as we talked about broadening our task force to work regionally, I couldn't help but feel excited for our future. That's a new feeling for me because I felt incredibly attacked and threatened by the risk of losing our water over this last year in the West and in Utah. It's organizations like these and competitions like these that have the potential for us to move the needle. I'm so grateful to be a part of this, and I think that those who worked hard to get our farm where it is today would be incredibly grateful for everybody going to bat for its success as well.
I'd like to commend my panelists for a wonderful discussion today. And I love a good acronym, and I think I'm going to come up with WET, W-E-T, working together with task forces, with working with our farmers in the private sector. E, education, educating our farmers about conservation programs, about new opportunities for them to take advantage of at the federal and state level. And T, technology, making sure that we're utilizing drip irrigation so that we can make sure that we are being great stewards of the water that we've been entrusted with. Because the truth is, we do not inherit the water from our forefathers, but rather it is on loan from our children and generations yet unborn. And with Farm Bureau's help in making this action plan happen, we'll leave it better than we found it. Thank you.
Today's discussion surfaced a number of ideas to address this timely policy issue. The contestants are now encouraged to engage in the Farm Bureau grassroots policy development process to build upon the work of today's discussion. Let's show these competitors our appreciation for a job well done. At this time, I will return control of this competition to the room chair, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. For a well-run competition, the judges for today's competition are Ebony Weber, Kate Fuso, Craig Hill, Allison Slagel, and Warren Mayberry. I now ask for the judges to report with me to the tabulation room.
Just set it on the stage. Thank you to our judges and timekeeper. We appreciate your help this morning. We would now like each competitor to make a brief statement about themselves, their Farm Bureau experience, and their connection to agriculture. Again, in voluntary order.
You can start us off if you want. Yeah, you can just go down the row.
My name's Laura. I'm from southern Utah, and I now live in northern Utah. I graduated from Utah State University, and I now work for them. They're our state's land-grant university. Our farm, as we mentioned, is 6th generation. Our girls are the 7th. They're not quite working yet, so we don't count them. But we have a feed yard operation, and we produce onions just an hour north of here, as I mentioned. Been in Farm Bureau for a while, since college, and had the privilege to serve on our state YF&R committee for 6 years, just retired as chairs, and overwhelmed with the support for me and everybody here, and it's been a privilege.
My name is Matthew McClanahan from Crossville, Tennessee. I want to first congratulate all my colleagues here on the stage. I've been involved in Farm Bureau since I was 18 years old and have been a contestant in discussion meets. It's the best discussion meet I ever heard, so I was glad to be a part of it. And I want to thank everyone from Tennessee for coming out, being wonderful supporters, and my friends and family. It's been a second family to me. I've been able to serve on our state's executive committee. My family and I run a small beef cattle operation in Crossville, Tennessee. I serve as the executive director for the Tennessee Association of Conservation Districts. I'm also a practicing lawyer, and I'm a part-time pastor. I got to be a part-time pastor on Sunday to make up for what I do as a lawyer Monday through Friday.
I'm Cole Likely. My wife Anna and son Lou are out there somewhere. They're over there. First of all, proudest to be Anna's husband and Lou's dad. The rest of it, whatever. But we're from Blackfoot, Idaho. We live in Blackfoot, Idaho on my wife's family's cow-calf beef operation. I grew up in south central Idaho on a beef cattle operation too, so beef runs in the blood. Day job as we work to try to figure out how to make two generations of two families from the same generation work on our operation. I work for a company called Danone North America, buying milk from dairymen and other suppliers across the country. Yeah, like these competitors have said, just well done. That was really cool. Kudos to Farm Bureau too and YF&R. It feels like the culture of Discussion Meet is so strong right now. The collaborative effort is just wonderful. I also wanted to shout out in the Sweet 16, Austin, Caleb, and Dalton. You guys, any one of you could have been up here and you could have killed it, maybe better than me. So, Arizona, Texas, Illinois, you guys should be really proud of them. And again, thank you.
So again, to echo, thank you guys, this was great. So I'm a Purdue grad. I graduated from Purdue in 2017. I did not get my start in Farm Bureau until post-college, so I started out by attending my first Young Farmers and Ranchers conference and actually met my husband there in 2019, so that's our Farm Bureau love story. We met at that convention. I am initially from the northwestern part of the state of Indiana, but I now reside in the mid-eastern part of the state. I serve on my county's board, and I'm our education and outreach coordinator. We are off the farm. I don't farm at all currently. My family still does back home, but that's not in the plans for us at the moment. So I work for our State Department of Agriculture, primarily in soil and water conservation. So I cover a territory of 19 counties there on the eastern part of Indiana, working with soil and water conservation districts.
Thank you, competitors. The winner of the 2024 discussion meet will be announced during the closing general session later this morning. Thank you again to our competitive event sponsors, Ford, Case IH, American Ag, and Stanley Black & Decker. They make it possible for us to award over $200,000 in cash and prizes during that closing session. Please join me in a round of applause to show our appreciation for our outstanding sponsors. And we appreciate your all's support of the YF&R program and hope you will attend the closing general session, where we will announce the winners of all 3 2024 Young Farmers and Ranchers competitive events. The closing general session will be held in Exhibit Hall DE of the Salt Palace Convention Center beginning at 11:30 a.m. There will be reserved seating for the final 4 discussion meet competitors. Thank you once again and have a lovely morning.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Sistak. I am AFBF's Director of Advocacy and Political Management. We are going to have a discussion here about the importance of getting civically engaged, running for public office. Joining me, I have Tyson Roberts and Kyle Wilson. They're both Farm Bureau members here in Utah, correct? And they both run for public office, have served in public office. But gentlemen, if you just want to introduce yourselves, and we'll jump in here.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, Tyson Roberts. We operate a 6th-generation specialty crop farm about 25 minutes north of Salt Lake City. Just happy to be engaged in Farm Bureau. Learned a lot from Farm Bureau and got a lot to give back, we feel.
My name is Kyle. I raise produce in southern Utah, about 45 minutes north of St. George. I own a construction company, and for my day job, I'm an outreach director for Senator Mitt Romney.
And now you both have run for public office before, right? And Tyson, you currently are a city council member, correct?
That's right. I serve in the town I grew up with. I say town, it's a city of about 80,000, Layton City, and yeah, just grew up in the town and developed relationships with leaders and with community. I think, thinking about agriculture in general, farmers, they gain a responsibility in community. They really have a connection to their community. So That's kind of what drove me, relationships, and just trying to build a good community for us to do business and raise a family.
And now, Kyle, you've run for public office as well. You work for Senator Romney now. What kind of inspired you to want to run, and then of course work, for a U.S. senator, serving the constituents and citizens here of Utah?
I spent so many years, and Tyson can testify to this, just shaking my fist at the sky and digging my heels in on issues, and none of which made any difference whatsoever. And I think ultimately that's what motivates me, is to try to move the needle, and because what I was doing before simply wasn't effective. And getting involved not only does move that needle, but in so doing, you learn how to do that more effectively, right? And I think that in and of itself it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. It's something that I value a whole bunch.
So, serving on your city council, working for Senator Romney, what insights can you share about engaging your constituents? And could you point to an instance where your constituents coming to you, talking about their personal stories, what they deal with in their communities, how that swayed you or helped, sway Senator Romney on important issues he deals with in D.C.?
Yeah, so I've learned a big lesson the last couple years on city council. I represent rural agriculture and farmers' rights, landowner rights. And I've really learned that I need to go into discussions open-minded, and be willing to listen to the people that are passionate about these individual issues. One specific one, we had a residential development coming in to right next to a nursery, production nursery in our city, and I go into the meeting thinking, okay, I think we can protect this farmer and keep him in business, which is my overall goal. And when that farmer stands up, he's talking about the inconveniences to the residents that would build next to him, and it really changed my perspective on thinking of both sides of issues. And I've always tried to do that, but we get in our grooves and we think what we think. But really listening to our constituents is important when we're making big decisions like that. So, and it's really changed the way I think and the way I try to go in without bias.
Yeah, I mean, we hear anecdotally all the time that it's not for the people, by the people, rather it's for those who participate, right? And on a daily basis, we see this. Yeah, so many people, myself included, for a lot of years, just like I said before, stand in the corner, shake their fist at the sky, and then go about their business and complain and piss and moan, and it doesn't make a difference. But daily, the people who are engaged and the people who are doing so in earnest and have good motives, and they care about whatever issue is that they espouse, those guys just make your life so much easier, so much more enjoyable. Even when you don't agree with them, I would, day in and day out, rather sit across the table from somebody with whom I disagree, who's engaged, and we can have a respectful disagreement, than someone who points fingers, shakes their fist, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and of course, one thing we do regularly at American Farm Bureau is train our Farm Bureau members on being civically engaged, showing up, using your voice to be an advocate for your family, for your community, for your business, for your neighbors. And I couldn't tell you how many times I've spoken to elected officials that they just say, hey, if you're not here, you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So I mean, that's just the importance of showing up. Now, of course, we are kind of in this period nationally where everybody's talking about the ages of some of our elected officials. We don't have to name names, but I mean, what would be your advice to the next generation about getting involved and why it's important to either, be an engaged constituent or run for public office?
So we look at how we get our information these days, and especially the youth. even we used to complain years ago about traditional media and how the biases are in the media, but now we've got TikTok, Instagram. A lot of our youth are getting their news from those kind of headlines, and really getting involved is the best way to really understand how our political system works. I think about a county commissioner that we have right now. Really, his campaigning was going to county commission meetings and really understanding the issues rather than looking at the headlines in the news and the issues that people talk about outside of government, really getting involved and understanding how it works. And another, a personal story right now, when my oldest daughter turned 12, I started taking her to the state legislature every year. And it was kind of a bonding experience. And it was cool to introduce her to some of the legislators in our state. But, I had no idea she'd take that to heart, and surprised us a couple years ago with a political science major. And now we moved her to DC recently. She's really getting involved. And I believe that's because she understands how it works. It's not just, getting upset about an issue and ranting and raving, like Kyle mentioned, but really understanding the process and feeling you can make a difference. So getting involved and understanding how it works.
Yeah, I agree. If I had advice for young people who are interested in politics, one would be become involved with Farm Bureau's training programs and leadership programs. I kid you not, for 3 years being constructively criticized by Jonna helped prepare me for tongue lashings that I will get at work from time to time, and helped me to reconcile with those personalities and so on. So those programs are invaluable. They made such a big difference in my life and my career trajectory. In addition to that, I think, like Tyson said, proximity to those processes is super important, and if you use Farm Bureau as a platform to get close to those processes, all the more power to you. But the closer you are, the more you understand how they work, and the better you can navigate and even manipulate those processes. So again, Farm Bureau is a great vehicle, but ultimately just not being afraid of taking risks, because failure is just what happens, and you/me, we will put our feet in our mouth from time to time, and it's just the reality of the world we live in, and it's not something we can be scared of.
I mean, it basically brings up, that saying that you always hear, you can't always be in control of what happens to the world around you, but what you can be in charge of is how you respond to it. And so there's a big difference between people who just get angry but sit at home and do nothing, or people who say, I'm gonna channel my anger, I'm gonna use my passion around this issue that upsets me, and I'm gonna do something about it. So I mean, it's one of the most powerful messages that I think constituents can hear, and especially if people think that things can be done better and they want to run for office themselves. So you both run for office, so I think my final question is to you. What's your advice to anybody who's thinking of running for office? Because I don't think it's for the faint of heart, so what would be your top piece of advice to anybody out here who thinks maybe one day they want to run for public office?
Yeah, I know how to lose, and so, but I can tell you what I did wrong, but chiefly among those is that long list of things I did wrong, frankly, is I didn't spend enough money. And I ran for school board. It's a down ballot race, so name recognition is super important. I didn't know that. The campaign school is a good resource, and I think having a good retail campaign is super important also, especially in Utah. We're tight communities. That word of mouth goes a long ways.
I think I look at my city council race about 3 years ago, and I joked with Mike a couple days ago. I was like, well, you get a good campaign manager that makes you look good, gets you that name recognition. But I look at my community, and I think it probably resonates with a lot of farmers that they work in that community for a long time, And I've always felt that I started campaigning for city council 20 years ago. And just being involved in the community, it helps out. I put a tractor on my campaign sign. I think, I joke about that, but farmers are respected, and I think people listen to them. A lot of farmers will be soft-spoken sometimes, and my wife jokes about I was not willing to speak at all prior to my Farm Bureau leadership trainings and the opportunities that Farm Bureau put in front of me. So I mean, just spending time in the community really helped me become more of a viable candidate.
Well, and Kyle, you teed up something for me, so thank you for that. I do want to mention in our last minute here, if you have ever considered running for public office, or maybe your spouse is thinking of running for public office, or maybe you think you want to work on a campaign one day and be involved that way. American Farm Bureau, we run a campaign management school that we teach every year. We've been to 10, 15 plus states now this year. We still have a couple more coming up, and we really teach you the nuts and bolts of running for public office. We do media trainings with you. We have you run a mock campaign so you can apply in real time what we've taught you. It's a day-and-a-half program that we do in your states with your state farm bureaus. And we have been doing this program since 1987, and we have an 87% win rate with the thousands of candidates who have been doing this school with us since 1987. An 82% win rate, but in 2022, we had an 87% win rate. So we are really teaching you the nuts and bolts of how to run a good campaign, and a campaign that will ultimately be successful. So if it's an interest you have, it's not just for candidates, it's for spouses, family, staff, supporters. If that is of interest to you, I will be at the AFBF booth right behind us for the next hour. Come by and chat with me. I'd be happy to tell you more about it. But Kyle, Tyson, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do to serve your constituents. We need good people in office. We need good staff supporting our elected officials. That's how a healthy democracy functions. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, good morning, Farm Bureau. Welcome to our 105th convention. My name is Sam Kiefer. I serve as Vice President of Public Policy here at the American Farm Bureau Federation. Thank you for joining us in beautiful Salt Lake City, and thanks for spending a little bit of time with us here on the trade show floor in the Cultivation Center Stage. I am pleased to spend a few minutes with you hosting a special guest. Let me introduce Scott Herndon. Scott Herndon serves as the president of an organization called Field to Market. And we're going to get to know a little bit more about Field to Market as an organization, what they're doing on behalf of farmers and ranchers in the agriculture community in the name of sustainability. Scott joined Field to Market in 2022, and prior to that he served as vice president and general counsel at the American Sugar Beet Association, where he focused on farm bill, sustainability, conservation issues, and regulatory issues. Scott also served as director of global government policy for S&P Global in Washington, D.C. And he served in various roles for members of the United States House and Senate, as well as the Florida State Senate. Speaking of Florida, he knows firsthand about agriculture like many of us. I'm a farm kid. Scott also spent some time on the farm, interestingly, in an orange juice operation, correct?
That's right.
Started by his great-grandfather in Florida. Scott holds a law degree and an MBA, and he studied in several countries. Another interesting thing of note, where he serves the agriculture community, he chairs the Agriculture Advisory Committee to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. So Scott, thank you for your leadership there. Let's let's talk about field to market.
Yeah.
The American Farm Bureau Federation has been long engaged with field to market, and Dr. Roger Cryan, our chief economist, serves on your board of directors at Field to Market. And as you know, farmers and ranchers have long been focused on sustainability, doing the right thing, because it's just what we do.
Yeah.
Well, what Field to Market has been doing is trying to put in place a mechanism to demonstrate and help tell the story of the conservation, stewardship, sustainability practices that farmers are doing. So I guess first, why does it matter? And second, how did Field to Market step in place to start doing some of these processes?
Yeah, so you all know that you're doing good things anyway. So Field to Market gives you the tools to measure what you're doing. And beyond that, it convenes everyone together. So we have almost 200 members, so representing the entire agricultural value chain. So it's divided among growers, civil society, affiliate sector, which are universities, agribusinesses, and brands and retail. And what we do, we bring everyone together to define and measure sustainability practices. But beyond that, an individual farmer could enroll in a project at Field to Market and then be a part of a project. We have over 70 projects across 37 states on over 5 million acres. But beyond that, we have a free tool that's available for any farmer to go online and enter their data just to measure their baseline and to see ways where they can improve. And so we're defining the tools, and it's important for all the farmers out here to know that farmers have an equal voice among the governance and the development of every one of our tools.
So the first question, I'm channeling my brother, farmer from central Pennsylvania. What happens to my data? I go onto your platform, I throw it in, what happens to my data?
So if you're using our online free tool, the data is confidential. So that could give you all assurance that if you're entering the data, that you own that data. But if you're part of a project, then some of that data becomes public, but it's aggregated. But an individual farmer could look at their data to figure out individual metrics they want to improve upon. So it's turned back to them as what we call a spidergram. So it has 8 points on basically a spider web, and the closer you are to the inner point of the web, the better you're doing. So a farmer could be implementing practices, but gets insights into like, hey, if I adopted this different tillage practice, or reduce my nitrogen reduction, or reduce my nitrogen application, then they could get a better greenhouse gas emission score, and things like that.
Let me try to break this down a little bit so that I can understand it. This is broader than just the carbon conversation.
Oh yes, yeah. So we have 8 sustainability metrics. So while we recognize carbon is super important, and we have a carbon metric now, we are right now we are updating our platform to have a quantitative soil carbon metric to be responsive to member needs. So carbon is super important, but so are water quality, soil retention, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, and we run the whole gamut. So we're saying that you can't just look at one component of it. Carbon is important, but we're saying the big picture is what folks need to be looking at.
So I go onto the platform and enter the data about my operation. I get that spidergram back. What would be my next step as a grower? How would I take the next step of trying to possibly partnering with an entity, whether it be Fortune 500 company or somebody to help maybe provide offsets to some of their sustainability promises?
Yeah, so I think that data would be a good benchmark for you to maybe share with your people that are buying the commodities from you, maybe the grain elevator, so it's a good benchmark. So it's our hope that will result in greater payments, but we really can't control the payments that you'll receive, but we just provide the data.
Right.
But we've done a lot of work on innovative incentives. So we launched a new strategic pillar a couple years ago called the Innovative Incentives Pillar, and we built upon that data because we recognize a critical need. We conducted a survey with the Trust in Food organization, surveying 500 farmers nationwide, and the results of the survey were that only 15% of growers received better access to markets or a higher payment for their practices. And so we said, uh-oh, we've got to do something, full stop. And so we launched this new innovative incentives mechanism to find out different ways that farmers could partner with producer downstream customers to better incentivize them for their practices. So that work is ongoing. So that's something that we're really looking at closely.
One thing I want to point out to the audience is, Farm Bureau from the very beginning of these conversations about the sustainability as a buzzword, and when responding to climate conversations from the get-go, we've been focused on making sure that everything that is done from a voluntary standpoint, that it is market-based, that they are incentives, and that it is science-based. And what the Field to Market platform provides is the opportunity to voluntarily measure that from a science basis and perhaps market, find value in the marketplace because of those opportunities.
Yeah, that's 100%. We are fully voluntary incentive based. That's our whole structure. Yeah, so it's private companies being involved in private projects and working out the incentive structures. We can provide recommendations for the incentive structures. So through our work, we identified 12 specific ways that farmers could work with downstream customers to incentivize growers to adopt more sustainable practices. But yeah, so it's all voluntary. But we also won a USDA grant for the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities, which again is also voluntary. Nobody's being forced to enroll in a USDA grant, but our grant is $70 million to reimburse farmers for adopting sustainable practices. And beyond our grant, there's a whole other bunch of other grants out there. I would encourage you all to look at the many opportunities out there.
And some of the buzzwords that are being used in this space, whether it be sustainability, whether it be regenerative, are frankly just things that in many ways farmers are already doing.
Yeah.
Some cases have been doing for a long time, or are very minor tweaks to current production practices. Can you talk about how Field to Market has evolved from not just measuring some of these sustainability efforts to also advancing what farmers are doing?
Yeah, so our whole model is continuous improvement, and we hold ourselves to the same standards. So we're always looking at ways to improve our value proposition to growers and make sure that what we're offering is valuable to them. And so we have convenings. We run huge meetings every year, and so that's a way where we can get growers involved. And so our whole framework is that if it doesn't work for growers, no one's going to be able to achieve any of the outcomes. And so we have equal representation of growers on our board. Every meeting that we're doing has a grower panel, and so we're a feedback loop. We're always asking the growers, like, hey, how can we improve our offerings to you to make sure it's living up to your needs? So that's what we're doing to advance sustainability. So we have the tools where people can set the benchmark, and it's all based in science. And the reality is there's a ton of overlap between climate smart commodities, regenerative agriculture, and sustainability. Everybody's working to advance everybody's working to advance the environment and improve grower livelihoods. So that's what we're doing at Field to Market to advance sustainability.
You've been around the Washington scene as long as I have, and the conversation has not always been like this.
Yeah.
It wasn't all that long ago that when climate and agriculture were in the same sentence, agriculture generally and farmers specifically were villainized, seen as the problem. And fast forward to today, and frankly, in my observation, agriculture and generally farmers specifically are seen as a solution.
Yeah.
But how can we keep farmers at the forefront, and what are you doing at Field to Market to make sure that farmers stay at the forefront of these conversations, and not just now, you talked about what you're doing now, but in the months, days, years to come?
Yeah, so we have, I mentioned before, we have 200 members, so we're constantly featuring growers, and so we're demanding the growers be a part of these conversations because it shapes their future. To me, it would be insane to try to force something on growers, on producers. So growers have to be a part of every metric we design, every standard we design, every definition we design, because without that, it's not going to work. And so that's everything we do at Field to Market. You mentioned Dr. Cryan is on the board, and I really applaud the work Farm Bureau has done to really emphasize that agriculture is part of the solution. It's not the problem. Agriculture can be part of the solution to climate issues. And I used to work in my previous life helping with some of the climate work you all were doing. And it really has changed the narrative greatly to let folks know that farmers are stewards of the land, and farmers are doing everything they can possibly do. But the reality is they can't do it alone. And that's why at Field to Market, we're bringing everyone together. Either it's through our meetings, through our metrics, we're just bringing everyone together, because a lot of the pressure is being put on farmers, and we're saying, yes, we understand that farmers are the ones that are implementing these solutions, but without support, farmers can't do this.
So you mentioned the word definitions.
Yes.
And I said the word a couple times today. The term regenerative invokes emotions from lots of people. Mm-hmm. Regenerative agriculture really has not yet been defined.
Yeah.
How can we, how do you see us as an industry, and where is Field to Market in helping to provide and create the definition?
So we've been around for 15 years, and we had a definition of sustainable agriculture since our founding. And 2 years ago, we adopted a definition of regenerative agriculture. And I'll summarize it briefly. Regenerative there's a lot of overlap between regenerative and sustainable, but regenerative is about improving the land. That's sort of the difference, but the reality is the outcomes are going to be the same.
Right.
I think regenerative it's looking at an ecosystem-based approach. Again, Field to Market is not just focused on one aspect, and our definition of regenerative agriculture maintains that, and it's grounded in science, which is important. So currently, through our platform, producers and project partners could start a regenerative agriculture project where they could say that they want to do regen ag, because a lot of the focus has shifted to regen ag. So we have the tools to enable that as well.
So for the sake of my brother, the grower in central Pennsylvania, what we're talking about when we're talking regenerative agriculture is we're talking no-till, we're talking cover crops, we're talking equip programs, correct?
That's right. So one of the key definitions of our regenerative ag is to maintain living root systems. So that goes hand in hand with no-till. So it's maintaining a living root system to maintain that soil carbon, and it's really focused on enhancing the soil quality, not just maintaining it, but enhancing it. So there is a little bit nuance between sustainable agriculture and regenerative agriculture, but it's about improving the water quality, improving the air quality, and all the other ecosystem services out there.
So regenerative agriculture, the way you've all defined it, is essentially been the mantra of farmers as long as we've been farming, which is to leave it better than we found it, right?
Sam, you're 100% right. Like we didn't invent this definition. Like it's been around forever. We just basically looked at all the work that's been done out there, and we said, this is what farmers have been doing anyway, and we just captured it in a few sentences. Yeah. But yeah, farmers have been doing this forever, but we just had a definition that took a while. Frankly, it took a while to get adopted, because when you have 5 sectors, it takes a while to find consensus, and we're consensus based. But yes, nothing new with regenerative agriculture. Farmers have been doing this for eons.
So the data that you've all been collecting, the work you've been doing, the research you've been able to conduct on the data throughout the life cycle of Field to Market does show positive trends. And again, we talk about farmers have always been doing this. Can you talk about the story of the positive strides that Field to Market has seen in the data you've collected?
Absolutely. So we publish something called the National Indicators Report every 5 years. And what our data has shown is that there have been improvements in every metric over the past 25 years. The most notable improvement was in 2005, and that's probably because the introduction of different technologies at that time. But again, there's been improvement. So the story is good, and we want to help you tell your story at Field to Market. And this reminds me of our Farmer of the Year, Jim Wynn, a dairy farmer from Pennsylvania. He has about 2,500 acres of alfalfa and soy, and he has a dairy operation of about 1,500 dairy cattle. And through Field to Market, he was able to measure the improvements on his farm, and he reduced, in just 2022 alone, he reduced his CO2 emissions about 15,000 tons, which is a pretty amazing feat. And so we published his work, gave him a nice award, but that story can be told thousands of times across the country. You know, I mentioned we have 5.4 million acres. So we have many, many farmers working on our projects. So it's our goal to give you the data that you need to tell your story and then amplify that message for all of you.
And over the last several years, several of the conversations, and I'll just shrink it mainly to the carbon conversation, has been on cropping, field cropping.
Yeah.
But the story you just told was about dairy, and the work of Field to Market is extremely broad. Includes livestock, includes all sectors of the ag economy. Correct?
That's right. So we have dairy members, but typically we can help measure the sustainability through the feed inputs. So we currently we can't measure methane, but we can measure the sustainability of the feed inputs, which is a huge component of livestock production. So we have the North American Meat Institute as a member, and of course Farm Bureau, represents the entire value chain. We do as well.
Those of us in the ag community and growers in particular feel pressure when it comes to sustainability conversations with marketers, with the companies who buy our commodities. When it comes to sustainability promises, many of whom don't necessarily truly understand what it is that we can do, are doing, have been doing. Can you talk about some of the work that Field to Market is doing across the supply chain to help create those a cohesive conversation and better mutual understanding?
Yeah, so the reason that our definitions are important is because we have something that the entire ag value chain, at least our members, have bought into. And so if you're coming to Field to Market, you can know that it's being supported by our members. And so it's a common framework for sustainability. That's not to say that our members don't have something slightly different than what we offer, but through our metrics, it's something that is agreed upon by the entire agricultural value chain. And so our definitions are agreed upon, our metrics are agreed upon by the value chain. And so that really is one of our key features, is having something that is bought into by the agricultural value chain. And so through our innovative incentive measures, we're working with our producers and working with our members to also elevate the production and better incentivize it too.
From my view, the exciting thing in this conversation is across the entire economy, agriculture is one of, if not the only, sector that can be a sink when it comes to some of these measurements that are part of the sustainability conversation. But farmers, in some cases, can't do these practices alone, need a little bit of incentive, and we're not necessarily saying it needs to come from the government. Sometimes companies, private companies are interested in engaging there. How is Field to Market engaging in some of those conversations with companies and how they interact with growers?
Yeah, so a lot of our members have their own incentive programs, and when we published our blueprints for the value chain report in 2022, that provided a broad survey across the United States of existing practices, but areas that we also wanted to do more to grow. And so we're working with our member organizations to continue the conversation. So since that report was published in 2022, a lot of additional work has been done. And we're constantly working with members to better think through ways that we can better incentivize production. Yeah.
And as an organization, Farm Bureau generally goes and knocks on the door of government to find things to solve and ways to fix the challenges we face. This is an opportunity where we've been engaging with folks in the private sector as they develop their models, as they develop their programs and incentives. But why? So it's not necessarily muscle we've worked a lot in the Farm Bureau world, but why do you think it's important for farmers to be at the table and part of the conversation, not just in the government conversation of sustainability, but also with their supply chain?
So I will say that if you're not actively engaged in these discussions, the work is still going to happen, the definitions are still going to be adopted, but they're not going to work for you. So it's my point of view is that you should be involved in these discussions, which Farm Bureau always is. And so you need to have a seat at the table, and that's what we're trying to do at Field to Market, to make sure that you don't have to go in and revise the definition after it's already been passed. So we're saying at the outset, you need to be working with your supply chain partners to define stuff, to define programs that work for you instead of something that works against you, which would be, if it doesn't work for farmers, it's not going to work, period. And a lot of money and time and effort would have been wasted in the process.
So what this looks like is simply conversations with your dairy co-op,
yeah,
conversation with your grain elevator, with your integrator, with your agronomist.
So I've worked with farmers basically my entire career, and I grew up as a farm kid. And I find that farmers are not shy when it's talking about their production. And so you just have to say, hey, this does not work for me. And let me tell you why. And that's the most important message that I would encourage you to continue to deliver. And come with tangible reasons why something doesn't work. But again, farmers are not are not shy when talking about production methods. And so I just encourage you all to continue that honest dialogue because through Field to Markets, farmers are partners. And it's my sincere belief that any members of Field to Market, any member organizations of Field to Market want to treat farmers as partners as well.
So half of the equation are growers being willing to step forward and engage in those conversations within their supply chain, and of course through government entities. And what we're focused on here, though, is the private science-based voluntary incentive through the supply chain, through the private sector. So part of that equation is showing up.
Yeah.
The other part is, after you show up, being engaged and maintaining that conversation. So how can we ensure that this not only happens, in the Midwest, but also all across the country?
So I think that farmers are going to learn a lot through the government's going to learn a lot from farmers through the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities program. I mean, that's really a pilot. It's funding a lot of pilots. And I think a lot of information is going to be learned about best practices. And then ultimately, I think we'll end up with a definition of climate smart agriculture. But I would say get involved with programs, but be very mindful when choosing among the programs, because there are a lot of options out there. And I think farmers are really good at determining what works best for them. I would just say, use your due diligence to not get involved in a program that doesn't look like it's going to work for you. I mean, that goes without saying. But if you want to learn more about Field to Market, I would encourage you all to visit our booth 513, just over here in the orange banner, and you can learn about our projects. And I would encourage you all to play with our FieldPrint platform, our online free confidential tool, and let us know. If you see something that doesn't work for you all, we are totally open to tweaking it to better serve your needs.
And there's other entities out there, public, private, that are provide an opportunity for growers to enter their data. But that doesn't, and in some of those streams they enter their data and it works only for that co-op or that company.
Yeah.
Does your platform, is it shareable with other entities?
It is, and that's the whole benefit of having something that's been developed by the entire agricultural value chain. So our data is recognized across the value chain. And so, and also we have something called Qualified Data Management Partners. Truterra incorporates our metrics into their platform. And the idea is that it's a one-stop shop, and we have 7 other similar relationships with technology companies, so that growers don't have to enter their data multiple times. They just enter it once. And so they just push a button and it works for Truterra, it works for CHS, it works for Bunge, you name it, the other entities, yeah.
And that's one of the things that I hear from growers is, it takes time to do all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. In order to get recognized for the practices that we're doing, and the really exciting thing about the Field to Market platform is once the data is there, it is portable to different opportunities.
It absolutely is. It's totally portable to different opportunities. So as I mentioned before, a farmer could enter their data, and they could use that data. They could go to a supply chain partner and say, hey, this is what I'm doing on my farm. This is my baseline. And so it's really about creating a dialogue. And the other side of that is the people that are buying from farmers need to be honest about what they're demanding of farmers. And so we're saying that there has to be that dialogue of the expectations put on farmers. There has to be full transparency about what is being demanded of farmers, but farmers through our platform have the tool to see where they can live up to the downstream partner expectations.
So it's January 2024.
Yeah.
In many ways, this conversation about sustainability and providing truly a snapshot of what a farmer's sustainability footprint is right now is just beginning. What opportunities, what exciting things do you see coming in this arena?
Yeah, so beyond the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities grant, and there's so many grant opportunities out there. Field to Markets grant is just one of many options for you all to investigate. And there's a lot of money. You mentioned EQIP. There's a lot of money for EQIP. There's a lot of money for RCCP out there. There's a lot of additional funds for programs that have been oversubscribed in times past, and now there's finally money to deliver these programs. So I would just encourage everyone to look at these opportunities. I know Farm Bureau, like you all, are a great resource for exploring the landscape of available opportunities, but there's a ton out there. So I think that even though Field to Market has been around for 15 years, our work is truly, the momentum we're seeing recently in the past 2 years is incredible. But that's not only Field to Market, that's the entire value chain. Everybody is focused on sustainability now.
So many folks in the audience and watching online have literally a computer in their pocket.
Yeah.
So where do they go to find your tool and to learn more about the good things going on at Field to Market?
Well, thank you for asking. So you would go to fieldtomarket.org and look up the FieldPrint calculator. And through that, you can find our online free tool. And there's contact information for me, for members of the Field to Market team. And I would be happy to have a conversation with anybody watching today or anyone in the audience.
Yeah.
And we're happy to be a resource for you all as you are figuring out which next steps to take in your sustainability journey.
I might recommend going there on your phone now, but wait till you get home and you're in front of a larger screen with a keyboard to start playing with some of the tools and the platform, because at least from my opinion, entering data like this in the phone might not be the best posture.
Yeah, and also I'd like to put in a plug. So we're hosting our second annual Sustainable Supply Chain Forum at Commodity Classic in the morning on February 28th within the Commodity Classic arena. And Farm Bureau President Zippy Duvall is keynoting that conversation. And we're putting on a grower panel and a brands and retail panel. And I would just encourage any of you to come to that. And there'll be a way for you to register shortly. And we're just trying to foster these kinds of dialogues. Honest, open dialogue is what we're trying to do.
Great. And I guess I'll close where I began, and that's the focus of Farm Bureau in all of these conversations is to make sure that the entire climate discussion focuses on science-based notions, that it is voluntary, it is market-based, and it is we're talking about incentives to move the needle, and that we're recognizing farmers not only for what they're doing, but also what they have done. And to learn more about what we're doing on the sustainability front, not just with our relationship with Field to Market, encourage you all to visit fb.org/sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in thanking Scott Herndon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you all for listening.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, man.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here for the forum hosted by the American Farm Bureau Promotion and Education Committee. I am Julie Stevenson, and I serve as a member of the Promotion and Education Committee. Our committee is made up of 10 representatives working on behalf of not only the 17 states with official promotion and education programs, but all of Farm Bureau. This means that we are uniquely situated to provide valuable resources and programming that represents and supports all state programs, whether it be promotion in education, young farmers and ranchers, or women's leadership, in their efforts to create engagement with the public about agriculture. We're excited to be hosting our Target Training in March. Target Training is AFBF's premier consumer engagement training open to all Farm Bureau members. We would love to have you join us in Columbus, Ohio, March 21st through 23rd. Registration is currently open, and the early bird rate ends February 8th. The Cultivation Center Stage is an important part of the P&E Convention programming because it offers us the chance to inspire and equip Farm Bureau members to effectively convey the significance of agriculture. That is the mission of the Promotion and Education Program and our purpose for being here today. This morning, we are pleased to present a dynamic duo of speakers who live the mission of the Promotion and Education. Kelsey O'Shea and Andrew-Swarthout work with American Dairy Northeast, running programs such as the nationally award-winning Virtual Farm Tour Program and American Dairy Engaged, which helps farmers reach consumers on social media. However, you can also find them sharing the benefits of agriculture in their free time through triathlons and running. Kelsey is an accomplished marathoner who has qualified for Boston on multiple occasions and currently trying to complete all the world marathon majors. Emma is an accomplished long-course triathlete, having qualified for the Ironman 70.3 World Championships. They're excited to bring their communication tips and tricks to today's presentation. Please help me welcome Kelsey and Emma.
So we're Swifties, just gonna put it out there right now.
Right.
So if that's your cue to text a friend and have them come, please do that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you all have your attention for a few minutes to go through what we think is going to be a pretty fun journey.
Absolutely.
I think so. So what you're seeing on the screen, obviously the name of our presentation, Driving Gen Z to the Table, okay? So we really took the theme this year to heart. We said, all right, new frontier, what really embodies that? What journey can we take people on? And immediately, us being millennials, it was the Oregon Trail, okay? Who's played the Oregon Trail? Oh yeah, all right. So you know what I'm talking about. Now, for those of you who are like, listen, the Oregon Trail was before my time, I respect it, okay? I do. However, fun fact for everybody, the Oregon Trail was first put out to computers in 1974, so the game has actually been around for a while. Here's all the options on the Oregon Trail. Here's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna learn about Gen Z. We're gonna travel to where they are. We're gonna lead with our why, build trust with our how, and engage with our what. So, I'm not giving you a choice, you're coming with us. We're gonna get started.
Don't get bit by a snake, because if you've played, you know you immediately die.
Yes, yeah, we're gonna try and avoid some pitfalls, but we're gonna take it one step at a time. I really like this quote, go west, young man, go west. Everyone's heard it, right? So the follow-up to that quote was, that I said is very frank advice, but it is medicine easier given than taken. It is a wide country, but I do not know just where to go. And I think that's how a lot of us feel trying to connect to this next generation. I want to do it, I'm committed, but I'm not really sure how, or how to get started, or how to navigate that. So, you're wagon leaders, you're looking at us. We work with the American Dairy Association Northeast, which is the checkoff dollars for dairy farmers in a 6-state region.
We're millennials ourselves, which used to be all the rage, not so much anymore.
Yeah, no, we're very much
we had like 2
has-beens.
seconds of fame.
Yes, yes. So this is Emma, I'm Kelsey. We are very good friends in real life. You heard we like to do a lot of fitness. We like to run around promoting a lot of chocolate milk recovery. That's our free time, but this is our passion during the day.
And we do a lot of travel racing together. We're headed to Japan soon for that marathon. And one of our favorite things to do when we're in another country is go to the grocery store, because that's one of the places you can really connect with consumers in any culture of like, how do they want their food marketed to them? And I think we'll see that a lot today in our presentation about Gen Z.
Absolutely. So we're gonna jump right in. Emma's gonna start us off with some play.
Yes, surprise, surprise, we like to move, we like to get people engaged. So by show of hands, we're gonna do a little bit of this or that. So first one, who here has a smartphone? Awesome.
Woo!
All right, perfect. And next one, favorite brand. Are you someone who buys on favorite brand? So you're very much a brand loyalist? Or best price? You're a deal, you're a bargainer, which one? Favorite brand? Brand loyalist out there, okay. Best price. All right, so a little bit of 50-50
A little bit of 50-50, I like it, I like it.
All right, do you purchase anything online? We'll start with anything. Are you an online shopper? Yes?
Woo, yeah.
Okay, no. No. Okay, how about for food? Who here does all their grocery shopping online via Instacart, something like that? Anybody? Okay, a few. And I'm assuming the rest of you are definitely a no on that one. Okay.
Who's an I need to touch my produce before I buy it at the grocery store? Look at you loyalists out there. All right.
Perfect. Okay, labels. Do you read them? Yes or no? So who are my label readers out there?
Wow,
okay,
a lot of label readers.
And the rest of you? No?
No label. Oh, no,
okay. All right, awesome.
What about, we got one more at the top, Emma. You forgot our favorite. What's our social media one?
I know. So social media, who's Facebookers in the crowd? Who are my Facebookers?
Facebookers, okay.
What about my Instagrammers? That's me. I'm definitely an Instagrammer.
Yeah, sorry,
I
guilty.
love TikTok, but like I just get down these positive video spirals where I'm sucked in for hours, so I gotta avoid TikTok.
So we're gonna do one more game?
Yes. So what I want you to do right now is look at this apple and write down 3 words you immediately think of when you see this apple.
Or like mentally, write them on your phone, whatever.
Yeah, you can write them on your phone, you can write them on a piece of paper, keep them in your head. Just give you about like 10 to 15 seconds to just think of something there.
All right.
Okay. Now, I want you to turn to the person next to you.
Ooh, sorry.
And just for like 30 seconds to a minute, just talk about the 3 words that came to mind when you were looking at this apple. What are the 3 things you thought of?
Turn to your person, talk to him. What were the 3 things that came to mind when you saw your apple? Given that we're from New York, I hope a lot of you were like, that bad Larry's from New York.
Yeah, where our Washington farmers, our New York farmers,
yes.
You're like, you're probably going variety, is it a hybrid, you know?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So, did anyone think of apple?
This.
Like the apple. Anyone? Raise your hand.
Did anybody say?
Did anyone think of the tech giant apple?
Woo!
Oh,
interesting.
So I love, we kind of led you into a trap because we know when we do this with farmers, you're obviously going to be like, it looks like a red delicious, or maybe it's a sweet tango, and I bet you the crunch is that, you know what I mean? So we knew that would happen. But the reason we also want to talk about this is because this next generation that we're talking about, if they were to see an apple or I were to say apple to them, probably the first thing they're going to think of is their iPhone, their iPad, their MacBook, right? Mm-hmm. They probably don't necessarily know about Snapdragons or different varieties of apples, right? So just that's something to think in mind, right? So in the core of what we're going to do today, I want us to think about this apple and let's be present. Let's take notes. You can feel free to screenshot what you see up here. Be open to change, thinking about things, putting yourself in the shoes of other people, and then learn to play through. We might lose some of you along the way, but if you've ever played Oregon Trail, as long as the majority of the group makes it to Oregon, we technically won, right? And I can joke about that, but if you think about it in agriculture, if all of us join together, with a common voice and say, we're going to reach the next generation of consumers, then we're going to succeed in getting to Oregon together, right?
Yep.
So we're going to play through this. It's going to be okay, I promise.
Yeah, absolutely. We are totally going to get through it. So we got to pack our wagon, right? Before we head off, obviously, before we learn anything about this next generation, we have to understand who they are. We got to grab our supplies, gather our intel, do all of that. So we're going to do that first and jump in with who is Gen Z?
Yeah.
Where are they?
Where are they spending time? Okay, so the really cool thing about this generation, 98% of them have a smartphone, right? And I think one of the crazy things about our generations is like, we started, dial up, and now I have a supercomputer at the tip of my fingers, right? But we're now talking about a generation that really doesn't remember a time when you couldn't get the answer at the tip of your fingers with your smartphone, right? And worldwide, 98%. This one I think is funny because we can't quite agree on it. Some say it's a 5-second attention span, some say it's 8. All I'll say is it's very short. All of us have very short attention spans. So how are we interacting? How are we engaging people immediately so that we can hold their attention and keep them interested in what we have to share? So a little bit more about them. Nearly half of Gen Z adults spend 3 hours or more daily on social media. Okay.
Math. Okay, guys, it's math class. Who's ready? 3 hours each day. So that's 21 hours a week. That's almost 1 day a week. That's 6 days a month. 6 days that you could be reaching a consumer on a free platform.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a lot of time. And now I know for those of you who are like, and that's why they're so difficult. Okay, calm down for me for just a minute. Let's take a step back. Yes, 6 days is a lot of time. You also have to remember, though, that Gen Z is getting all of their news on social media. So while you may sit down and read the newspaper, totally respect it. Some of you may get on a desktop and read whatever you like for news. Some of you may listen to a podcast. Gen Z is going to social media for their news.
And I think it's also important to note the social media apps that we don't inherently think of as social media.
Yes.
Like Facebook Messenger. Right? That's a direct
Instagram.
message platform where they're just communicating one-on-one to each other. Or WhatsApp. WhatsApp has actually for years now been the leading social media platform, but we don't think about it because it's all direct message, right? So those platforms are there too. We got to think about it as this is where they're reaching their peers and communicating with each other.
Yep. All right,
So,
lay it on us, Emma.
Top social media platforms in the traditional sense, right, where you're reaching a wide demographic. We have YouTube at the top. I think when I was 5, I made a mistake. I should have gone into toy review, because had I would have been like a billionaire at this point.
Yes.
But it's crazy on YouTube. Kids will just spend hours watching reviews of their favorite toys, watching their favorite gamers play their favorite video games, right? So my nephew actually is obsessed with the Millennial Farmer. And for Christmas, my sister got him all of his gear, right? He loves farming. He loves going to the farm with his dad, and then he likes to come home and watch farming on YouTube, right? So it's even in our cultures, right? Our next generation wants to live and breathe their passions. Of course, we have TikTok up there, Instagram, Snapchat. Facebook and Twitter have been going down for quite a few years now, a little bit in popularity.
They really have one. The big one, of course, is TikTok, the big, hairy, ugly monster in the room that I know a lot of people have mixed feelings and mixed reviews about. The basic thing I will say about it, though, is that it's where they are. It's where Gen Z lives. They consume a lot of their content out there. They're not overly particular about how long it is either. I know we said people have a short attention span. What we're finding with Gen Z, though, is that if they like the content, they will watch and stay.
And their engagement rates are high.
Yep.
Like in older generations, even like ourselves, a millennial, you didn't go into the comments section. You didn't go there. It was dark. It was scary. Now, I mean, Gen Z, if they like what you're doing, they're going to comment on your content, and they're going to fight for your content. They'll like go to bat for you in the comment section, which is amazing. Engagement numbers are definitely higher than they have ever been. So, we've talked about Gen Z. People might have different thoughts. So who is Gen Z? All right, so in thinking of Gen Z, be honest. Have you ever thought that maybe they were a little lazy, a little phone addicted? maybe overly sensitive.
All right, y'all are looking at us.
They're
Yeah,
like,
some of you
people
can
don't
raise
wanna
your
own-
hands. Yes,
people
I've
don't wanna
thought
own
this
up to
about
it.
Gen Z on an occasion or two.
My dad will complain about them, like, you're raising two of them. So
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it's your problem. And whiny, right? But what if we thought about that differently? What if we took those words that maybe we associated with a generation we don't quite understand and said, are they lazy or do they have healthy boundaries for what they want?
And for work.
And for how they spend their time. Because you can't get time back, right? So we only have so much time, so maybe they have healthy boundaries with that. Phone addicted, or are they tech savvy? We're gonna get into like why you should be online later. Maybe that next generation on your farm, you should tap into their tech savviness and say, hey, you have good skill set in this. Maybe this is one of your primary roles here. Overly sensitive, or are they emotionally intelligent?
Yep.
Do they recognize their emotions and do they feel those emotions and they're okay with that, right? Whiny, are they bold and questioning? Which is a great way to be, right? Asking the why, the how, the what that you're doing, which is some of the things that we're gonna get into.
Absolutely, part of the frontier spirit, right? Bold, questioning, different, willing to change the status quo.
And I think all of us in agriculture can appreciate some of those generational gaps, right? When we've come back to the farm, there's always a few disagreements. There's some misunderstandings between what we learned at university or through our tech programs and we want to bring back to our businesses, and you always have to work through that. So who is Gen Z? Generation Z is born between 1997 and 2012. The generation following Gen Z will be Gen Alpha. So like my oldest niece just turned 13, her and all my nieces and nephews are already part of Gen Alpha, which will be up and coming. Over 20% of the US population is Generation Z. And I think it's important to note, a lot of these folks are graduating college and they're entering the workforce. And they have money to spend, and they have thoughts on how they want to spend it.
Absolutely.
Almost 1/3 of the global population is Generation Z as well. And their combined projected income will surpass $33 trillion by 2023, right? So that's what this does come down to, right? We all have farms, we're passionate about what we do, but we have to sell the products we're producing to our consumers.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for us to tap into. How are we gonna make sure that they feel confident in the food we're producing so that they'll continue to take that $33 trillion and spend it on what we have to sell?
All right, Gen Z and food.
So 73% are concerned about the impact of food. That could be anything from food as a case of national security to will we have enough of it to will our climate stand up to produce food for all of us, right? 1 in 3 are influenced by climate change. So no matter what data set you look at, climate change in some shape or form, whether more nuanced to more kind of wide span, will be in their top 5 for a set of concerns. No matter what, they are very concerned about the constant warming of our climate. All right, so where are my online shoppers that we had earlier?
Who was our online shoppers, yeah?
Yeah, so you guys, you got something in common right here. 35% shop online at least once a week, right? Who here has had like a niece or a nephew either took your phone or took your sibling's phone and bought something online, right? Whether by accident or on purpose, I see some people raising their hands, right? So they just grow up with it. They know digitally, I can just go online, I can get what I want.
So one interesting thing too about Gen Alpha that we haven't really thought of, and even Gen Z, they got purchasing power really early. Okay, credit cards, Alexa, whatever it is, they knew at age 8, hey Alexa, order me another this, or grab a cell phone. So now for the first time ever, we have purchasing data sets. Now mind you, their children are protected from some data mining, of course, right? Under the age of 13 in particular, we don't have a ton of data. But this generation got their purchasing power really early, which means they wield a big sword.
Since I'm in a group of farmers, I can share this story. My one nephew was 3 and he took my sister's phone and he bought a lot of Angus semen, like a lot. So that was a conversation with her semen company. She's like, that was a mistake. I did not mean to buy that much. We're good. You were just here at the farm.
Yes.
So it's funny, right? They know they go on your phone. He helps his mom with the Angus herd. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna, so it's funny.
And over 50% read the label.
Yeah, so we're our label readers, right? We had
Label
a few
readers,
of you,
yeah.
Right? Another thing you have in common, right? You want to know what's in your food. Maybe its origin, where it's coming from. Being in dairy, right? I always look for the plant code on the products that I'm buying. So Gen Z and loyalty. So they're actually the least brand loyal generation out there. So I know I had a few of you that were brand loyal, right? So that's something that you might differ now. We're starting to see where, nope, you have to like continuously work for them to come back to your product.
Yeah.
They don't want just the lip service of like, oh, this is what we're doing. They want the how, the why, and the what of what you're producing, right? And proving oneself is essential, repeatedly essential. Okay, so they have to keep coming back to the table, which is why social media is such a big part of this, right? Because it's a free way to constantly share what you're doing and show in real time what you're doing to produce these products. And then they conduct thorough research before making decisions. And I know we might disagree on what the word research might look like. But it comes back to they grew up with smartphones. So no matter what, they're gonna go online and they're gonna find some source of information. So if we as agriculture can be some of those first articles, those first websites that come up in the SEO search on Google, that's important. One of our claims to fame that we get super excited about, when you search virtual farm tour, since we were one of the first people in the country to do dairy farm ones, we always come up because the SEO. We've had that traction drawn to our webpage, right? So that's
shameless plug. Spring virtual farm tours are coming up. Yeah. Register your classroom today. Anyways, yes, we do appreciate that though. So if anybody went online and literally if you just type in virtual farm tour, our website is the first one to come up. We worked really hard to get to that position, and that's what I want people to see. Because I know that I'm showing a real farm, that it's information that's been vetted, it's good information, right? So you have to contribute. You got to contribute into the mass amount of information going out there. Now, does that mean that you need to go out tomorrow and become a TikTok star? No.
Yes.
Oh.
I think David would be pretty good at that.
I mean, David.
I think he could.
Wow. Oh, boy. Anyway, so David is my father-in-law. He is in the audience. He's a state president. So we'll refrain from making him a TikTok star just yet. But the rest of you, if you would like to try that, let us know. We can't actually help you with
from my farm's here. Maybe between the two of them.
Oh, yeah, maybe between the two of them.
We'll do a test plot for all of you guys. Get back to you.
Yes, and the last one, of course, is their willingness to research sets them apart from other generations, whereas other generations found brand loyalty relatively early or actually tended to take a lot of generational advice, right? So they really followed in the footsteps of the previous generation before them and trusted that that was a good information source. Gen Z is very willing to go out and explore and make their own decisions and wants to make their own choices. So that's in part of the reason, again, why we're saying you got to put the information out there.
Yeah. And we're finding they're very fiscally responsible as well, which is very interesting. And I think if you look at the climate in which they grew up, some of the economics that happened, you know, the housing crash of '09, some of the things they saw their parents go through, I think it kind of shows you maybe that's why they're being a little bit more financially conscious in how they're spending their money. Going through college nowadays is a big financial choice for them.
Yeah.
Right? So I think they're thinking from a young age, what can I afford and what makes sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, is anyone surprised by that? That Gen Z would be one of the most fiscally conservative generations? Is that surprising to a few people who are like, they're on TikTok shop every day buying stuff. My kids be buying, you know, it is shocking. It's not to say that they aren't spending money, but they are spending it very specifically. They only want to buy things that ultimately reflect their morals and values. So when they are seen purchasing it, someone can make an assumption about what they believe in. And I'm sure some people in the audience are thinking, that is so much for just picking out a banana. That's a lot of pressure. But here's the thing. That's the way they're making choices. We are not going to change the way that they are inherently wired to make choices. We have got to go to them. So which is why we're going to have you think a little bit differently about how you're communicating with consumers about agriculture on your farms. We're going to start leading with your why. Here's the thing. A lot of my farmers tell me when they meet a consumer, yep, I'm a farmer. I'm a dairy farmer. We have X number of cows. It is the 3rd generation farm, and we farm in this town. That is the sentence, right? Like, that's the canned jam. It's on the front of every news story. It's in the beginning of every written piece.
We have 8 seconds.
We have 8 seconds. That doesn't tell a Gen Z anything about you that they understand or care about. They have no idea what it means. If I walk up and say, hi, I live on a dairy farm. My husband and his family milk 3,000 cows in Madrid, New York. That doesn't mean anything to them. What does mean something to them is relating to them on a social or an ethical level in ways that they care about. So we really believe that realistically most people get into farming. I truly believe, everyone in here, good person, you got into it for good reasons, good values, whether that be a family tradition or you come by it honestly like me, growing up in San Diego, having zero farm background and really just falling in love. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to choose your why and I want you to lead with it. We're going to start with social whys. The most common I hear farmers give me, I farm because I care about my community's wellness. I care about providing safe food. I care about people having good nutrition to fuel their life. Now, farmers don't say this, right? Like, my farmers don't tell me this sentence.
But you could probably, that statement, does it resonate? Do any of those statements resonate with any of you?
Yeah,
about why
does
you
anybody,
do what you do?
one of those statements, those are at least one of the reasons why you farm. It's not usually what we say, though. And what we say and what we put out there is what's going to bring Gen Z to us. So we just kind of got to adjust what we're saying. So in looking further at this, we're going to dig a little deeper, and I'm really going to scare you. So why do you choose to wake up and grow food every day? It's not easy. If it is it easy for anybody? Because, like, what are you doing? I want to do that. So it's not easy. You know that there is a reason in there. That is incredible for Gen Z. It's like catnip, okay? They want to believe in something bigger than themselves. High overarching moral values. You guys are chock full of them. I just need you to start with that. So I'll give you an example, and I'll scare you in a minute. By prioritizing care for community without sacrificing product quality and nutrient density, we can build a strong foundation for sustainable growth and a positive impact. The reason I'm going to scare you, this statement feels very Gen Z, doesn't it, right? Big, lofty, good goals. AI wrote that statement. I typed into ChatGPT, give me a reason why Gen Z would believe in a farmer with these priorities. Boom shakalaka.
And the important thing to know about ChatGPT, it is pulling all of its information from the entire interweb.
Yep.
So it's going to Facebook, to Google. It's pulling the top answers, the top Google searches, the top posts from Gen Z. And it's formulating, because it's using those trigger words like Gen Z, the priorities you put in, to write a statement.
Now, if I were to adjust this, if I wanted a farmer to explain why they really, believe and do what they do, I'd probably go something like this. Farming allows me to create a culture of care for my community. That's really what it does, right? And I respect that you are growing tomatoes, you are growing corn, you are milking cows, you are raising beef animals, you are doing all of those things. But the reason that you personally get up to farm is because it allows you to create a culture of care for your community. Your local communities are important to you. Obviously, too, that involves implementing strategies and practices that prioritize these aspects in your operations. That is going to be our next step after we get through with our why. Then we're going to tell them how. Okay, so I promise your science, technology, your super smart brains, all the cool stuff you do still gets to be a part of the conversation with Gen Z, but we're not going to get them at the table without telling them why. So now let's say you're like, I like my community, but it's not that great. Maybe you got other reasons to farm. Right. Okay.
Social might not be your
social might not be your thing. So I use this example a lot. My husband is a very good person, right? But he is not a people person. We are clearly a little bit different, given that this is very much my element and I enjoy this. But let me tell you, does he care about animals and the land? okay? Ethical reasons. He cares about doing the right thing. That is like, I mean, his compass points so disgustingly far north. It is wild most days. So what I hear...
That he lives in the north and you grew up in the south.
Yes,
there in
yeah.
San Diego.
It makes sense. So I farm, these are the statements I hear with people who really identify with an ethical why, my farmers. I care about my animals' wellness, I care about environmental conservation, and I care about the people that work on the farm. That doesn't necessarily mean like the greater community isn't maybe my first priority. There is no shame in that.
Yeah, so for those out you, maybe the social ones didn't resonate with you. Do these resonate a little bit more? Maybe for some
Yeah,
folks?
for some farmers, this might be more your jam if people aren't your thing.
It's still really important things. All things Gen Z cares about.
So why do you wake up each day and care for the animals that ultimately provide us with food or the crops, plants, soil? Again, this is another AI statement. Similar prompts typed in to Bard, which is Google's AI. By integrating animal wellness, environmental conservation, and the wellness of team members into our farming practices, we can create a harmonious and sustainable system that benefits everyone involved. Now, mind you, that's kind of a long elevator pitch, but let me tell you, if that's what you're leading with Gen Z, you're gonna get their attention. I could lead with a very different statement that says, you know, I judiciously follow specific practices with regard to antibiotics and ultimately animal care and procedure that are all for the health and wellness of my animals based on science. All true. But Gen Z doesn't know what that means. You're only 2% of the population, farmers are. You are a very small portion. They don't know what it means. And if I lead with that, I've already lost them in that 8-second attention span. But if I tell them I'm integrating animal wellness and environmental conservation, ultimately to create a harmonious, sustainable system, those are all bigger ideas that they are going to understand.
And I think the idea of that statement, it's not going to tell everything you do in one go, but it's going to open their minds enough to say, oh, sustainability, sustainable systems. I hear about that in school or in my college, in my university. I'm going to ask you this question. It opens the door for more questioning from them.
So we hope you walk away with the thought process of, where do I land on this? Where is my why? Can I open, when I talk to a consumer, when I go online and I think about what I'm going to post, how am I conveying that why first and foremost out in the forefront, showing that off? And now we got to back it up, right? We got to back it up with the how. And I respect that that's an important piece of it. So we're going to build trust ultimately by finding that shared why with our consumers and then explaining how your farm lives out that value system, how they do it.
So it's funny because if some of you felt like those statements were a little frou-frou, good, because you got to back it up with the how. They want to know the how too. So the statement might resonate, but you still have to tell me how you do what you do.
Absolutely. So we give an example, right, of saying to someone, I use antibiotics judiciously. The ultimate why behind that is caring about animals. I care about animal welfare. It's a priority for me. Then the example of how. I am only following protocols that are set out by a third party that ultimately reviews my farm regularly.
That's where you can start maybe getting into some of the science in the conversation.
Absolutely.
And talking about that.
Same ones for why. For environmental welfare, if you're going to follow up with the how, using plant genetics judiciously, or maybe it's using fertilizer judiciously. Whatever that looks like.
Technology to help minimize the use of herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, things like that. So also the why, the how, and then the what, right?
Yep.
So the why, animal welfare, okay? You care about animal welfare, that's great. The how, you're using antibiotics in a responsible manner. But now the what. What does that actually look like? We're going to get into the minute detail. What management practices do you use? And that's where, if I'm a dairy farmer, I say, oh, well, let me explain to you how I have to work with a veterinarian. And we follow the label as prescribed for a lot of these medications. We're not just giving anything antibiotics. There are no antibiotics in milk, right? How do I use these management practices and what do they result in? Well, healthier animals, less disease spread, right? Those are all things we care about, right? I want to ensure the meat, the dairy I'm consuming off of any animal is raise responsibly, right? So now we're getting into some of that.
So, and of course, I know some of you are thinking, this is great if I had a 30-minute lecture with every consumer and I could go through these methodically in my head. I promise social media can do it. Short form video can do it, okay? I know it seems really tricky, but when we think about creating content or what we put out there, the things that we say, if we just take a step back on the back end, do a little bit more planning, which I know you farmers understand, before we go into the fields, we do a lot of planning. We don't just grab seed and wing out there, right? I don't think. Again, if it's easy and someone's able to do that, please let me know where you're farming and how you're doing it. But you guys you understand what it means to reap what you sow, okay? The same is with our interactions with consumers. You have to put the time in, think a little bit about constructing these ideas so that they're gonna hit home with them and you're not wasting your time. So the same example for environmental welfare, right? What management practices are you using? Ultimately, what does that result in? Healthier soils, less plant disease. What research would you use in talking with a consumer or even when putting it online? Because we said Gen Z will do the homework, they'll do the research. That can be a quick 30-second video with text on screen.
And you have unlimited space and time on social media.
Yes.
So instead of thinking about big picture, sometimes it's easier for us to start on what we want to share. So I want to talk about cow cooling. So I want to talk about our fan system.
Yep.
Okay, that's starting at the opposite end, and then I'm going to work my way backwards and ultimately land on, oh, the reason we have a cow cooling system in our barn is for animal welfare. That ethical, responsible thing that I care about, right?
Absolutely.
So, minimize it. You have all the time in the world, post after post, break it down. It doesn't have to be everything you do for our environmental sustainability at one time, right? Like I can't talk about cover crops, buffer strips, all of that in one video. No, I'm gonna break it down. Plus it makes my life easier because then I have more content to cover.
Now, as far as our lovely trip on the Oregon Trail, we've had a pretty clear situation thus far, right? Nobody's gotten cholera, nobody's died of dysentery. Well, that's all about to change. So we know we've talked about all these easy kind of three-step system, right? Leading with our why, supporting with our how, explaining with our what, to really bring consumers, especially Gen Z, back to the table. Well, here's the reality. Social media is fabulous for us to share all of those things, but there will be bumps on the road. And that's a part of the journey. Sorry if Marge is in the audience, you have cholera. I know that it's hard to swallow this. You've got to put it out there and know some of it's not going to land. Some of it's going to get negative comments. Some of it's going to be uncomfortable. Ultimately, while that doesn't feel good for us, it shows a level of authenticity that Gen Z requires to prove that you are real, that you are telling the truth, and that you are showing, or you are being as transparent as possible. Gone are the days, and I don't know, for us somewhat elder millennials in the room, gone are the days of curated, beautiful social media with everything matching, really nice comments, lots of likes. Gone are those days. Gen Z lives for the fights in the comments section. They want the anarchy, okay? They really do. And now I know I hate it. I'm a people pleaser by trade. It makes me uncomfortable. It doesn't make them uncomfortable, and I've got to get over it. It's really important to building into that space. It's okay for you to make a mistake. And they want to see that. They want to see the discourse. They want to know that you're a real person and that they can disagree with you and you're not going to disappear and hide your Facebook page and never come back.
And I think that comes back to that idea. It's why we need all of us, right?
Yes.
Because not one single person in this room is going to translate or reach everyone. You're not going to be everyone's cup of tea,
No.
right?
No.
Or probably coffee in this room. You're not going to be everyone's cup of coffee, right? But together as a room, your personality, your authentic self is going to speak to different groups and demographics. And I do dairy, right? That's my expertise for a living. That's where my passion lies. We also need everyone because we need the apples, we need the wheat, we need the soybean, we need the corn,
Yeah.
we need all our vegetable crops, right? To come together and share the stories on how we're producing food here in our country.
Absolutely. There's a time and a space for everyone, and I give this example in my region because I know too, maybe there are those in the room who think, I have like 100 friends on Facebook. I could post something and it's not gonna make a difference. Who thinks that? Be honest. I know some of you are lying. I think that on a regular basis. Well, why would I post? It's just, I have like 1,000 followers, maybe. What difference am I gonna make? Someone else will post it. That's my husband's favorite line. Well, someone else is doing a really good job with that social media stuff, and that's great. Yes, someone else probably is, but in our region in particular, Emma and I represent about 9,000 dairy farms. In our region of the dairy farms that we serve, there are 50 million consumers.
And that includes in New York City in our region,
That includes
Philadelphia,
New York
DC.
City, DC, Philly. If every single one of my dairy farmers had 5,000 impressions on social media per year, they would reach almost every single consumer in my territory. Now, 5,000, think about that. In the grand scheme of things, 5,000 impressions isn't a lot. You could have a personal Facebook page, a personal Instagram page, and very easily hit that in a year. So when I say that it takes everyone, no matter how small you think your contribution is online to reaching Gen Z, you matter.
And yes,
You
we
do.
know some of your audiences might overlap. So yes, is that technically all 50 million? No, but it's putting into perspective why your work matters.
Yes, absolutely.
Your effort matters. Being a part of the conversation matters.
So we've been on a journey. It's been pretty good so far, pioneering with Gen Z. Hopefully realizing that we're gonna have some bumps along the way. We're gonna lose a wagon wheel. Somebody might drown in the river.
Probably gonna get bit by a snake.
Probably gonna get bit by a snake. Ultimately, there are people and resources out there to support you, and Gen Z is curious. They wanna know. They want to be pioneers, right? They want to see something different and to ultimately find companies, brands, foods that they can believe in. You can be that person. You really can. And of course, I don't want to leave Gen Zs in agriculture behind. This is another important piece that we always get into. I know who has a Gen Z in their farm partnership? Or like a back on the farm? Oh, good Lord, some of y'all need some generation planning. But when you have a generation coming back to the farm, maybe they're not there yet, maybe they're still in college. They have a lot of insight. I'm gonna say something a little scary. You gotta trust them. You've got to trust them, help you do this stuff. You've got to really give them an opportunity to show what they know. And I know it's very different than what we've done in the past, but I'm always a big proponent of, I respect that Gen Z is not my generation. I do a lot of studying, I do a lot of reading about them, I try and do a lot of talking to them, but I am not them. I do not live their experience.
We have a farmer in our area I always like to talk about because his son is Gen Z and he's super passionate about coding, app writing, and 3D printing.
Yep.
So he said, you know what? I'm gonna let you test this out on the farm. So his son coded a whole app for the cow barn that controls the lights, the fans, the alley scrapers. It went great, and he said, hey, you know what would be great? If we coded all the SOPs for every piece of equipment, put the QR code in the piece of equipment, so anytime an employee went into a piece of equipment, they can have the safety procedures for that equipment at the tip of their fingers, because everybody has a smartphone, and we can increase the safety on our farm. Then COVID hit, and he said, oh my gosh, this broke on the farm, I can't find the piece, and his son said, I'll 3D print it for you. That's how he got parts during the pandemic, right? So yeah, obviously that's a level of passion that every one of your Gen Zs on the farm might not have, but that's a moment of trust to say, this is your passion, you are good at this, and you can help our business right now be better.
Absolutely. So you've heard us talk about our journey. We've given you some ways that you can lead forward, hopefully to have more successful interactions with Gen Z. That's all we want for you, is to feel more successful when you talk with them and feel like you've really changed, maybe changed their mind, changed their heart, encourage them to think differently. So we hope you're going to do that, of course, leading with your why, whatever it may be, supporting with a how, backing it all up with your what. But the big thing we talked about at the beginning of our presentation was how we drive Gen Z to our table, right? How do we drive them back to understanding agriculture, understanding farmers, understanding our practices, and trusting us? Well, I think we got it backwards. We got to go to them, right? That's the struggle. And it's hard. It's a big, long journey to get there. There's a big divide. But we need to drive our wagon to Gen Z. We've given you a roadmap. We've given you a little bit of that. We've told you there's going to be bumps on the way. It's going to be a little rough, but we're here to help. So we hope that you found that at least a little bit helpful in thinking about how you're going to interact with Gen Z, understanding who they are, what they're doing. We are happy to take a couple questions because I have just a couple minutes, truly, right? 2 minutes. I have 2 minutes. If there are any questions,
we'll stay after too.
We'll be here afterwards, absolutely, as well, to chat with you. Anybody burning questions, or are y'all going to wait? Yeah.
So, are you saying that Gen Z is a little less, like, instant gratification motivated because they're willing to do more?
Great question. So her question was, for those of you who didn't hear it, is Gen Z a little less instantly gratification, like, driven?
Yeah. You go ahead.
Yeah, I would say yes, right? Because they're not purchasing on impulse. They're going to take a step back. They're going to do their research, right, as we talked about, and really follow up to see, is this a brand that I want to spend my money on? So they'll do that as well as being fiscally responsible to say, do I need this? Is it necessary?
Yep.
Because this is my money now, and I want to spend it in things I believe in.
Yeah, for the first time ever, big companies are unable to escape taking a stance. I mean, we've seen it, right? You look at Nike, you look at any of the big clothing brands. If they don't come out with an official stance on whatever is going on, maybe socially, politically, Gen Z will drop you like a bad habit. And they won't think twice about it. Their dollars will walk right out the door because there's about 40 other companies, small companies, big companies, whatever it is. There is so much choice. They do not have to be pigeonholed into the trendiest, the biggest, the latest and greatest, which that's great for us. Farming has never been, the trendiest, the latest and greatest, the hottest out there. That's awesome for us. We have our moment of being smaller, family-owned, real people behind the company. Take it as an asset. Alrighty, folks, we're probably going to get the hook. As we said, we will be here. I'm Kelsey, Emma. We're from the American Dairy Association Northeast. Thank you for sitting with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey and Emma. Let's give them one more round of applause for a phenomenal presentation. We sincerely appreciate your time and your attention this morning and hope to connect with you as you experience all that the 105th annual meeting has to offer. If you have any questions about promotion and education, please reach out to anyone on the American Farm Bureau Promotion and Education Committee. We would love to share more with you about our programs and our projects that help us best equip our members who are passionate about agriculture and help them share that story. Thank you once again for attending our forum this afternoon. Have a phenomenal afternoon.